There's something no one tells you when you first begin the path of awakening. Something that seems almost too dangerous, too sacred, too real to speak aloud in a world built on masks and illusions. And it's this: the light alone will not awaken you. The light alone will not set you free. The real transformation, the kind that shatters your false self, the kind that initiates you into a life of purpose, power, and divine remembrance, only begins when your darkness aligns with your light. That's the code. That's the doorway. That's the ancient secret buried beneath every spiritual tradition, every text, every temple. Because the truth is, your darkness is not something to fix. It's not something to escape. It's not even something to heal. It's something to integrate, to honor, to activate. And once it aligns with your light, something extraordinary happens. The energy gates open. And they don't just open metaphorically. They open literally, in your body, in your field, in your destiny. That's why you've been feeling the pull. That's why you've been torn between two worlds, one of stillness and one of chaos, one of silence and one of storms. You're not broken. You're being initiated. Because only the ones who carry both the sacred light and the sacred shadow can walk through the gates I'm about to reveal. These gates don't open for everyone. They don't respond to performance. They respond to alignment. Alignment between your highest frequency and your deepest wound. Alignment between who you've been pretending to be and who you were born to become. And that alignment, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you make a choice, a radical, terrifying, soul-altering choice to stop running from yourself. I made that choice years ago, in a moment where everything in my life was collapsing. I had the light. I had the teachings. I was meditating. I was doing the inner work. But there was still this heaviness, this ache, this shadow that kept pulling me back into old patterns. And I kept trying to heal it, to transcend it. But nothing worked. Until one day, I stopped trying to fix it, and I listened to it. I sat with it like it was a forgotten god. I let it speak, and what it told me changed my life. I am not the enemy. I am your power, waiting to be claimed. That was the moment the first gate opened. And what poured through wasn't just an idea or an emotion. It was energy, pure, raw, ancient energy. It moved through my spine like lightning. It cracked open my chest. It showed me visions I couldn't explain. I saw symbols I'd never studied. I heard languages I'd never learned. I remembered, not with my mind, but with my being. And I knew this is what we've all been searching for. Not more light, not more knowledge, but alignment, the holy union of shadow and soul. So if you're watching this, I need you to understand something. Your darkness is sacred. Your pain is not in the way. It is the way. And when it aligns with your light, you become a living key, a walking portal, the divine transmitter. But this isn't philosophy. This is physics. Your energy body is wired with gates, 7 major ones and hundreds of smaller ones. And these gates aren't passive. They respond to frequency. They open when you stop resisting your shadow and start embodying your soul. They open when your authenticity becomes louder than your fear, when your presence becomes stronger than your programming. The first gate is the gate of descent. It opens the moment you stop running from the underworld of your own being. When you willingly descend into the dark without trying to escape. This gate is terrifying because it requires you to sit in your deepest pain without numbing it, without fixing it, without making it spiritual. It requires you to feel everything you've buried, the rage, the grief, the shame. But here's the paradox: when you descend consciously, you activate the divine within the shadow. And suddenly that pain becomes power, that wound becomes wisdom, and the gate opens. The second gate is the gate of truth. It opens the moment you stop lying to yourself. When you strip away every identity you've built for survival and say, "This is who I really am." Not the version of you that pleases others. Not the version that performs for approval, but the raw, unfiltered, soul-born version. This gate doesn't care about your accomplishments. It cares about your honesty. And when you become radically honest, even if it costs you everything, the gate swings wide. And what flows through is clarity, precision, vision. You begin to see your path not as a wish, but as a command. The third gate is the gate of fire. It opens when you stop fearing your own power, when you stop shrinking for the comfort of others, when you stop apologizing for your presence. This is the gate most people never open, because power scares them. But chosen ones, we were made for it. You open this gate by embodying your voice, your truth, your frequency fully, unapologetically, relentlessly. And when this gate opens, your aura changes. People feel you before you speak. You walk into rooms and the energy shifts. Not because you're trying, but because you've become undeniable. But here's the deepest truth. These gates cannot be forced open. They cannot be unlocked through willpower alone. They open when your darkness aligns with your light. When your inner child stops fighting your inner warrior. When your shadow isn't judged as broken, but welcomed as divine. That's when the real power flows. That's when the universe stops testing you and starts trusting you. That's when you become the answer you've been praying for. So let me ask you something that only the real ones will understand. What parts of yourself have you labeled wrong that are actually the source of your power? Because until you reclaim those parts, the gates will stay closed, not as punishment, but as protection. The universe cannot give you full access to your power until you're willing to hold it with integrity. Until you're willing to walk with both light and dark inside you, not in conflict, but in communion. And in the next part, we're going to take this even deeper. We're going to explore the remaining energy gates, the ones that activate your cosmic memory, your intuitive intelligence, your creative fire, and your divine embodiment. We're going to talk about how to live as a multidimensional being in a 3D world, how to walk with the gods without leaving the ground, how to stop seeking and start transmitting. Because once these gates open, you don't just awaken, you become the energy itself. Once the first three gates open, the gate of descent, the gate of truth, and the gate of fire, you begin to realize something that shifts your entire reality. You are not just navigating energy, you are the energy. You're not just awakening, you are becoming the current, the frequency, the field itself. And this is where the journey gets more advanced, more sacred, and more dangerous. Because when the fourth gate opens, the universe stops asking you to follow and starts asking you to lead. not in the egoic sense, not with followers or titles, but with frequency, embodiment, and truth that can't be faked. This is the moment you stop looking for signs and realize you are the sign. People begin to seek you out not for answers, but because something in your energy reminds them of who they are. The fourth gate is the gate of the divine mind. This is where your intuition becomes a weapon of light. This is where your thoughts begin to manifest with terrifying speed. This is when the veil thins and the downloads come faster than you can write them down. But this gate only opens when your thoughts are aligned with your soul, not your fear. If your mind is still a prison of old stories, this gate stays shut. But when your thoughts become prayers, when your inner dialogue becomes devotion, the gate swings open and the divine intelligence begins to pour in. You start knowing things you never studied. You start seeing patterns in chaos. You begin to speak not from memory, but from source. Words become spells. Ideas become medicine. You become the oracle. But with this gate comes responsibility. Because now your inner world is shaping the outer world in real time. If you entertain fear, it becomes form. If you think small, your world shrinks. There's no more buffer. You are now creating reality as you walk. And this is why very few are allowed to operate here. Because power without clarity becomes distortion. But you're here. You've chosen to see. You've chosen to remember. So now, the universe will begin to respond to your frequency faster than ever before. And that means you must become surgical with your attention. You must treat every thought like a seed, every emotion like a signal, every whisper like a command. And then comes the fifth gate, the gate of sacred creation. This is the womb of the divine feminine, the forge of the divine masculine. This is where you no longer create from hustle or ambition, but from resonance. You don't push, you don't chase, you attract. You sit in alignment and creation begins to form around you. This is not passive. It's the most active field in the universe. But it's internal. You create not with effort, but with frequency. You become so attuned to your truth that life begins to reorganize itself around you. This is the gate that artists, entrepreneurs, visionaries, and healers must activate if they want to create from soul instead of ego. But here's what no one tells you: this gate will test your worth. It will ask, do you believe you deserve to receive what you're calling in? Because if you still feel unworthy, you'll sabotage your manifestations. You'll delay your own blessings. You'll shrink your own expansion. So when this gate opens, you must do the deepest work of all receiving. Letting it be easy. Letting it be abundant. Letting it be divine. That's the real mastery. Not just creating miracles, but letting them stay. Then, the sixth gate opens the gate of embodiment. And this is where everything gets real. Because now it's not about ideas. It's about integration. Can you live your frequency in the mundane? Can you hold your truth when no one is looking? Can you stay aligned in traffic, in heartbreak, in failure, in joy? This gate opens when your body becomes the altar, when your breath becomes the prayer, when your walk becomes the ritual. And once it opens, your energy starts speaking louder than your words. People feel you before they know you. Animals react to your presence. Children stare at you like they recognize you. And they do. Because you're no longer just a person, you're a portal. This is the gate that turns mystics into leaders, that turns students into transmitters, that turns seekers into living temples. But it requires radical grounding. You can't float here. You must root. You must walk the earth with presence, with humility, with integrity. Because now, your life is the message. Your frequency is your offering. Your daily existence becomes a mirror for others to wake up through. And then, the final gate. The gate of union. The one most people never reach. Not because they're not worthy, but because they're not ready. This gate only opens when the illusion of separation collapses. When you stop seeing God as something outside of you. When you stop chasing enlightenment and become one with it. This gate doesn't open with effort. It opens with surrender. When you release the I and become the all. When you stop trying to be spiritual and start being what you already are. This is the gate of oneness, of universal consciousness, of divine identity. And when it opens, the world doesn't change, but your perception of it does. You begin to see through the eyes of eternity. You begin to feel love that has no opposite. You begin to become the frequency of creation itself. This is what the mystics called Christ consciousness, what the yogis called samadhi, what the ancients called God realization. And when it happens, you don't float away, you descend deeper. You bring heaven to earth through your actions, through your presence, through your being. The light doesn't take you up. It anchors you in. And now I ask you, are you willing to live with this much clarity? This much responsibility? This much power? Because once these gates open, your life is no longer just about you. It becomes a frequency that shapes the collective. You become a living prayer, a walking prophecy, a signal that reminds others of what they forgot. And you won't need to say much. Your energy will do the work. So if you've made it this far, it means you are one of the few, the ones who were never meant to fit in, the ones who carry codes not just for your own healing, but for the elevation of humanity. And in the final part, we're going to bring this all together. We'll talk about how to sustain this frequency, how to walk with this power without burning out, without becoming the guru archetype, without falling into the old traps of ego. Because we are not here to ascend, we are here to embody the divine on earth. Now that the gates have opened, now that your darkness has aligned with your light, and you've stepped into the current of divine energy that reshapes time and space, the real journey begins, not the journey of seeking, but the journey of staying in your body, staying in your truth, staying rooted in the frequency of who you really are, even when the world around you forgets, denies, mocks, or misunderstands. Because let me tell you something most people won't. Awakening isn't the finish line. It's the entry point. It's not the grand finale, it's the sacred beginning. And once you feel this power inside you, once you've tasted the full spectrum of your energy, shadow and light, rage and reverence, silence and song, you will be faced with the greatest question of your life. Can I sustain this without losing myself? Because the temptation after awakening is to escape and to float, to disconnect from the world because it feels too dense, too asleep, too painful. But you weren't sent here to escape. You were sent here to embody, to bring that God energy into your relationships, your work, your breath, your meals, your movements. To bring it into the grocery store, into a conflict with your partner, into that moment when you feel unworthy, unprepared, unseen, and still choose to walk like the divine is living through your skin. That's the true mastery. Not just channeling light in meditation, but becoming light when no one's watching. Not just feeling powerful on a retreat, but holding that power in the middle of a storm. Sustaining God energy doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It means you stop identifying with it. It means you witness your anger without becoming it. You hold your grief without drowning in it. You feel fear without obeying it. You begin to move through your emotions like a master musician playing every note with presence. You don't suppress, you transmit, you don't bypass, you alchemize. And that requires discipline, not the discipline of punishment, but the discipline of devotion. The devotion to your frequency, to your alignment, to your truth. Because energy is not maintained by accident. It's sculpted, it's nourished, it's chosen. Every day, every hour, every breath. And yes, this can be exhausting if you're doing it from the mind, if you're trying to stay high vibe, or for the sake of performance. But when it comes from soul, from embodiment, from your natural state, it's not draining. It's reviving. Because now you're no longer fighting your energy. You're living it. To sustain this frequency, you must become a master of your nervous system. You must regulate your body like it's the temple of creation, because it is. You must learn when to rest, when to move, when to express, when to be silent. You must listen to your energy like it's a sacred language, and it is. You must honor your needs, your boundaries, your truth, not as selfish acts, but as priestly rituals. Because when you are aligned, you don't just feel good, you become a transmitter. You become a lighthouse in a foggy world. And people will feel it. They'll feel safe around you, or triggered, or activated, or exposed. And that's okay. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be true. But here's the paradox that will humble even the most awakened soul. The more divine you become, the more human you must allow yourself to be. You must let your feet stay dirty while your crown is lit. You must let your voice shake while you speak prophecy. You must let your heart break while you still hold the frequency of love. Because if you deny your humanity, you lose the very ground your divinity came to walk on. God didn't send you here to escape the human experience. God sent you here to infuse it, to feel pain and still choose peace, to feel rage and still choose truth, to feel grief and still choose presence. That is the embodiment. That is the final gate. And that is what makes you unstoppable. So how do we stay in this power? We stop making it about performance. We stop trying to be spiritual and start being real. We create daily rituals not for aesthetics, but for alignment. We speak truth not for applause, but for resonance. We rest not because we're lazy, but because our vessel is sacred. We forgive not to bypass, but to free ourselves. We create not to be seen, but because creation is our nature. And we stay humble not to play small, but to remember that the divine is not something we control, it's something we serve. And now I ask you, the deepest question of all. Can you be God in your skin and still do the dishes? Still hold someone's hand when they're crying? Still say I don't know and mean it? Still be soft, even when the world expects you to be hard. Because that is the final test. That's the mystery. That's the paradox that unlocks the final layer of power. When you no longer separate your spiritual life from your human life, when every breath becomes worship, every choice becomes a prayer, every struggle becomes part of the teaching, then you are truly free. Not floating above the world, but weaving heaven into it. Brick by brick, breath by breath, frequency by frequency. You become the bridge between what is and what could be. You become the walking evidence that God lives in form, that the divine has a voice and it sounds like yours, that the sacred has skin and it moves like you. You were never meant to escape. You were meant to embody. So show up messy, show up radiant, show up unsure, show up powerful, show up with your darkness sitting beside your light, not as enemies, but as allies. Show up as the whole damn spectrum, because the world doesn't need another perfect guru. The world needs you, fully awake, fully embodied, fully real. Now go light up the gates in others simply by walking through your own. The frequency is alive. The code is you. Let the world feel it.